So what we're going to look at doing now is texturing the object. Now texturing cylinders is always one of the hard things. I don't really like doing it, but you got to do it sometimes. So the first thing we want to do is open up our GMAX material editor, go to a new material, FSX, specular all the way to black, and now we can select our reference image. For this I'm going to use the daytime textures. I'd always save them in PNG format. You don't have to, you can use other things, but I don't think GMAX will import DDS files, so you can't go straight to that. Make sure you select this blue and white box here, select which object you want and hit apply. In this particular case we want to apply the texture to all of the objects. Now you can see here that this is pretty boring, it's just white. So what we need to do now is actually map the texture to the objects. We'll start with the base plate because that's probably the easiest. So for that, go into your editing tab here, come down, select UVW map. What we want to do is, you can see that now the texture's been applied, but obviously that's not really how we want it. So we're going to select face. I usually use face for mapping cylinders, I just find it easier. And then we add another modifier, the unwrap UVW. Hit edit, and in this little drop down box here you can pick a texture, bitmap, and you can now import a base image. This has nothing to do with the textures on the object itself, it just makes it a little bit easier to work out where you want to put all of your points. Select one of these, we'll go for ID number 1, because that's what we want to put on this part of our texture here. I always just zoom into about the middle of that, then zoom out here, select everything, scale it down. I find it easier because you've put your or centered your view here. It's just easier when it comes to getting the right scaling and that sort of thing because it's just centered. So that looks pretty good. We don't want to go too close to the edges. I'll probably actually modify this texture a little bit because you can see that we've got some of these holes pretty close to the edges. To a certain extent we can rotate it to help that, but unfortunately that's not going to make too much difference in this case. You can see now on our image here that the top of the object has been mapped and that is the right texture. So I go to texture ID 3 and do much the same sort of thing. For this here will be the edges around the base. I don't have any specific textures for those, so what I'm going to do is scale them down and just go and put them in this slightly darker patch here. I find it's always good to have edges of things just a little bit darker because it just looks a little better when you go and put it beg your pardon, when you actually put it into Flight Sim. So just close that there, and there's a little bit of funny graphics going on here, but that will sort itself out once you've exported the MDL. Alright, so that's the base plate mapped. We do much the same sort of thing with the next the vertical part here. Exactly the same, go in, UVW map, face, unwrap UVW, edit, bring in your background image. You don't actually have to bring the background image in, it's just unless you know your textures really well, it's going to be a bit of an issue for you. Now with this we actually don't want it to be scaled down from a box, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it down a little bit, but then put it over our object, our texture here, and then actually manually move all the points into place. Oops. Now we can play around with this here a little bit to get all the lines in this image here into the right positions. You can spend a lot of time fiddling around with getting textures mapped right, or you can make slightly more generic textures, which makes it a little bit easier, but I won't go into too much detail there. As you can see, because this is just mapping each side, each of 6 sides of this object, it means we've got quite a lot of these, whatever this is here. You can see that repeating itself around. So what I might actually do is remove that from the texture, because I think that's a little bit too much. Once you've got it mapped, you can make modifications to get it to look better. But the main thing is to get it mapped in the first place, then you can easily change textures when you get it into ModelConverterX. Bring up ID 1, this will be for your top plate here. We'll use the same as this, but we'll make sure that these holes aren't actually in it. So put it there somewhere, should be okay. Alright, so you can see here that we've got our light fluid texture map now. So what we're going to do now is go into select by name, select all, FS Tools LOD name tool, create new GUID for this, whatever it actually says, and give it a friendly name. So in this case I'll call it MB HD Light 01. It'll do. What I always do is, actually we'll just put a, there we go. I always copy that, just select it, Control C, then go File, Export Selected, just hit Control V again there. That way your model names will always line up with what you see in Instance Scenery or ADE, whatever you use for object placement. Select Flight Sim Model.mdl here, and just navigate to your objects folder. For me, I'm just going to chuck it in this GMAX Tutorials one to make it easy. Hit save. All these default settings can be kept as is for objects like this, it's no issues. Hit OK, a couple of seconds to export, and just make sure you save it as well. Obviously not saving your work is never a good idea. Right, now we can open up our MDL here. I've just got it assigned so that ModelConverterX automatically opens MDLs, and you can see we're obviously missing some textures, but the advantage of taking a look at the model before you actually put your DDS textures, which we can see are listed here, into the same folder as your model, is that you can get a pretty close inspection as to the model itself, so that way you can pick up any errors, anything that doesn't quite look right. Sometimes on these things, when you've got a number of hexagons representing a round object, I'll actually rotate, say, this top light a little bit so that they don't line up perfectly. I just reckon it can make it look a little bit more round from a distance. So anyway, to convert the textures, I use predominantly DXT1 bitmap manipulator. Open that up. Make sure you go Image, Flip Image and Alpha. Because we'll be saving as a DDS texture, Flight Sim reads them effectively upside down. And you can go just Flip Image, but if you have an alpha channel, you've got to remember to flip both. So I just automatically go Flip Image and Alpha. Go File, Save, DDS Texture, keep it the name that it already is. In this particular case we actually don't have an alpha channel, so we can just stick with this DXT1 no alpha. That generally gives you a pretty good file size. Hit save, just close it. Now when we open up our model again, there you go, you can see we've got the textures on it. Now I'm not quite happy with the mapping here, so that might be something that I play around with, but it actually doesn't look too bad. These textures will have to be modified a little bit, but and the base textures could use a tiny bit of work, but that's not for this tutorial. What I will do though is tell you how to apply a night map to an object once you've got it in ModelConverterX. You can see here I've got this other texture. It is exactly the same essentially. The difference is that in this case I've used the original blue color. In fact, I think I might have enhanced it slightly and darkened the rest of the object, whereas by day I've actually tried to darken the light itself, because of course the light won't be on during the day. So first thing we're going to do is convert this texture as well. Image, flip image and alpha, file save as, DDS, DXT1 is fine. Close that. Right, now what we do is we go into our material editor here, select the texture here, scroll down to this area here where we've got the textures. If it's not really important for things like taxi lights, but if you're making other models, if humans for example, anything with little rivets, corrugated iron, that sort of thing, it can be quite useful to put in a bump texture and potentially also a specular texture. For the moment though, we just want to put in a night map texture. So just click out here on the little box, find your texture tutorials. We want this one here, which is our night image. And at this point you can just close that. What I will show you though is go into textures here, and if you want to rename these textures, so let's just say MB Taxi Light HD Blue, we'll instead change this to night. If we now go and reload the textures here, you can see that it's coming up saying, oh, I can't find that texture. So if you go into Material Editor Textures, what you can do here is just select that and then add in night, and now it's gone reloaded and you can see the textures have come back correctly. Yes. If you hit this one here, Texture Night Render Mode, you can see what the night textures are going to look like. When I'm actually doing these light models properly, I actually create a number of planes that create a image, or you can add an effect to it. There's multiple ways of doing it. But for the purpose of this tutorial, now that we've made those modifications, you can just go into Object Information here. Just you can see what your GUID is there and your friendly name. At this point, if you want to modify them, you can just hit Edit, change your friendly name, or set new GUID, and that will automatically generate a new one. Otherwise, just hit Export Object. We want to make sure we select the FSX MDL object. It can stay the name it has, that's no issues. That will overwrite the previous file. But there we go. So now you can open this up. And there it is with your day and night textures. Alright, I've opened up LibraryCreatorXML. Like Model Converter, this is one of the programs available from Arno's website. Create a new library. It doesn't really matter what you call it. We'll just call it MB GMAX TUT for tutorial. Save it. Add an MDL object. We want to navigate to where we just saved our MDL. That's it there. Hit open. Save library. Compile library BGL. I will actually compile it to this folder, so just hit save. That'll do its thing. Close that. And okay, it's still going to put it in the other one. Alright, here it is here. It actually went and dropped it in another folder. Sometimes it is a little bit temperamental, but that there is your new library BGL. So what you can do now is you can select that in instance scenery and place your object as required. Alright, I'm here in the sim. This is the landing light, sorry, the taxi light that we just made. I haven't done anything with it since I exported from ModelConverter. I haven't changed any textures or anything at all. This one here on the right, this is one that I actually made earlier, so this actually works properly at night, and by that I mean it actually has a bit of a glow and so on. But you can see this is what it looks like by day. We can turn around and do whatever we want. This here is the light that I made earlier at night. So this actually has the glow added to it, and it's also got that bit of the light on the ground as well. But in a nutshell, it's pretty much the same thing. Adding the glow on that is a completely separate subject, but we've covered basic how to make a three-dimensional model from a 2D canvas in GMAX. You can do all sorts of things. Obviously this is using cylinders. It's creating round objects, so in some ways it's sort of a little bit easier. But you can create all sorts of interesting flat box type objects as well. So there was some boats that I've been creating for my Talbot Bay scenery, and they had some rather interesting structures for their canopies, that sort of thing, and that was all created using this technique of basically using a background image and moving groups of vertices around to get a good looking shape. So anyway, I hope you found it worthwhile. If you were using this tutorial as a bit of an intro to GMAX, I actually don't suggest making a landing light. The reason being is that to get the effects right and that, it's actually quite tricky. But I think we have covered some of the bases of basic using GMAX. Alright, looking forward to next time. Thanks for watching, guys.